In just a second here, when I see his smiling face come running around the corner of this screen, I'd like to introduce you to the man who puts this festival on every year. Oh, wait, there he is. There he is. Come on up here, Paul. Give him a round of applause, folks.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just part of a team that puts us on. My partner Angela out there in the audience. Tons of work. My family who lives right in the house. I grew up here, so it's a really special place. My sister's over there selling vintage items, so we're really blessed to be able to put this on and to have you join us. So thank you for coming. In your program is a little bit of information about Bike Trilogy. So I hope you were able to read that earlier, but I just want to add a little bit to that. So last fall, I was having coffee with Tom Schroeder, the animator for Bike Trilogy. We were talking about an animation project about Spider John Kerner, which I hope we make someday, and you're going to love it if we do. And as we were talking about it, he said that they had just completed the third animation for the Bike Trilogy. And I said, just kind of on a whim, well, you guys should do all three of them at Square Lake. And he mentioned it to Dave King, and then I got an email saying, Dave's down for doing that. And that's why we're here tonight, right now. So this is pretty cool. And I just want to say a little bit about Dave King and Tom Schroeder. They're the kind of guys who do things like this. They're adventurers, they're artists, they put themselves in challenging situations that make their art magic and timeless. And that's why it's exciting to make events like this, because you get to see the reaction of connecting artists like that with you, the audience. And I just want to say that in the early years of this festival, the Square Lake Festival, this is now our 16th year. In the early years, it really meant a lot to me. It meant it was extremely powerful for me to have Dave King involved with the event, performing here, and it kind of, you might say, it endorsed what we were doing. It stuck with me as I saw his career grow. It stuck with me when Tom Schroeder shared his animations with this festival early on, and watched his career grow. And it kind of validated the approach that we had, which was different than other festivals. Not a lot of commercial, forcing you to buy $6 bottled water and having a silent, totally separate backstage. So the way we do things is a little bit different, and these two artists validated that, and I want to thank them for that. And it's a great honor to be able to showcase this project tonight as a way to say thanks. So if you could give them a round of applause. I want to thank our MC, David Campbell, who's going to facilitate. This is going to be a real treat for you. It's Count Your Lucky Stars, and you get to see something no one else has seen, the whole Bike Trilogy. So thank you for being here.
Paul Creager, ladies and gentlemen, the founder of the Square Lake Film and Festival Feast. And thanks again to all the volunteers that make this happen, for you guys for showing up every year. Come on up here, boys. Let's do this thing. So, animator Tom Schroeder is going to be over here on this microphone. And I don't know, you guys know Dave King? So, Tom, tell us a little. Here, let me adjust that. Let me tech that for you. All right, we're good now.
Okay, thank you.
So tell us, just like, give these guys the sort of intro to the concept of what you two worked on together, and some context so that they can really truly understand what it is that's going on in these shorts.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to thank Paul for having the sort of vision to do this thing, because I had just met with him about something else in a coffee shop, and I told him that I'd finished the third bike film in this trilogy that you guys are about to see. And he said, we should really try to do that live with Dave King. So this was back in maybe January of this year, as I finished the third film. And so it was his idea to do this, and I'm really excited myself to see what's going to happen, because this is an experiment that has never happened before. And what we're doing, Dave and I were just talking about this is essentially the process backwards from the way the films originated, because the way that it happened was there would be a story, the stories that you're going to hear of the documentary voices telling documentary stories about unrequited love and bicycle trips. Would get recorded first, and then I'd hand those audio tracks to Dave, who'd study them and prepare his composition/improvisation. I'd take him into a studio, record that, and then I'd sit down for about a year with an analysis of those 2 tracks, and I would painstakingly create the hand-drawn animation that you're going to see. So what we're going to do tonight is I pulled Dave's drums out of the soundtracks, and Dave's going to re-respond to my response originally to what he did with a fresh improvisation. And so we're going to, as I said, it's an experiment to see how that actually works, and we don't really know, so we're going to try that out. But the reason that the films happened in the first place was that I was back in maybe the late 80s, early 90s. I had an appetite. I was one of the small audience for avant-garde improvisational music in Minneapolis, and I started to hear about this drummer, Dave King. People were telling me about him, and I started to just follow. Whenever his name showed up, I'd go out and see shows. And I would have a strongly visual response to Dave's drumming, because he's mad to create, and he's a very narrative kind of musician. So I would just close my eyes, and I would have a very visual response as an animator. And so I thought I really should try to find a way to bring Dave into the process of making one of my animated films. So with the first film, Bike Ride from 2000, I had the story of a former student of mine who rode 50 miles to see his girlfriend, got dumped, and then had to ride 50 miles home. It's everybody's story, though. I was getting divorced at the time, so I related to it strongly, and everybody who's seen the film has made that bike trip metaphorically in some way. But I gave that, the first recording session took place in a very lo-fi studio in northeast Minneapolis, and Dave had the audio track of that story, and he'd prepared his improvisation. He came into the studio. You hear him say at the beginning of the recording, in a kind of mock soulful way, "This is the one." And then he recorded. You also told me that headphones were called cans. Like if I wanted to sound professional in a recording studio, I should refer to headphones as cans. And so he recorded.
So informative. He's a teaching, loving man.
He's very generous with information that way. So we recorded the one take of the thing, and we went upstairs into the recording control room to listen to it, and we listened to it, and it sounded great. I said, "Dave, that sounds great. Let's just do another one, so I have something to choose from." And then Dave said, Yeah, you're the director, but just check this out. So I saw a documentary recently about these Japanese monks that sat in front of a blank canvas for like 6 hours drinking rice wine, and then in one cathartic gesture of abstract expressionist gesture, they threw ink on the canvas, and that was the thing. I think that's the way we should look at this, and I think you should just trust me that I've got it.
That's like a really long way of saying I'm done.
Well, and then I looked at Dave, and I was trying to figure out, does he have to be somewhere else? Does he have somewhere to go, or does he really believe that? And then I asked the recording engineer, did we get good levels? And he said thumbs up, it was all good. And so I trusted Dave, and then when I sat down to analyze the track, I realized in what great detail he did actually respond with his kit and with the percussion instruments that he had to the narrative of the story, and he had given me a lot to work with, and he did in fact get it. And so I decided that Dave's whole preposterous metaphor about sitting in front of the blank canvas should set the philosophy for the whole film. And so I didn't storyboard anything. I didn't throw away a single drawing. Basically everything that I drew with that same philosophy, like straight ahead, improvisational, as if we were kind of a jazz quartet, me working very slowly over the course of a year to respond to what Dave had done. And so that was, in fact, the philosophy for all three films. I consider it to be kind of visual jazz, and it is an opportunity for me to kind of play with Dave in that way. But it is the visual part of it is also very much an improvisation. you want to contradict anything I've said, Dave?
No, that was a long time ago. I think you're right.
This was around 1998 that this recording would have.
I was happy to be asked to be involved with you. I love your work, and I think the Gutai painting references I think we used that at that time. And I did have some place to go, actually. I was gonna. That time found out that there was lard used in the beans for a vegetarian burrito at Taco Bell, and I had been a vegetarian for a while. I was very upset. So I was just dealing with that at that time.
Surely some of you can identify with this issue. What do you think? Should we let it rip? You guys want to see the first one? All right, this is great.
I was going out with this young girl named Carrie. I was feeling sad, because I hadn't seen her in a long time, and I decided to ride my bike to her house. And she lived in Malacca, which is about 48 miles away. And I didn't know how to get there, so I just looked it up on a map, and I found probably the longest way I could have taken to get to Malacca. So I'm starting from Blaine, 117th, I believe. No, Polk Street, no. I don't remember which house it was. I left at 6:30. I hadn't slept the night before. You start thinking real fast. I don't know if it's because of adrenaline or... The only bad thought I had in my head was that maybe it would freak her out that I rode my bike that far to just see her. And so I just started riding my bike. But it doesn't work very well. The chain falls off a lot. It was real sunny, pretty hot out. I'd stop, and stretch my legs and look at these people's houses and wonder, what they would like and if they'd let me come in and use their phone. Just kept on riding my bike and, looking at the ground, just kind of looking at how trippy it looked or whatever, because it, kind of ended up looking like frame by frame, kind of. It smelled bad most of the time because the cars were driving by me. The scariest thing that happened on my bike rides was when semis would drive by. And my dad, when he was young, he used to drive semi, and these people were drunk on the wrong side of the freeway, and they had head-on collision. Near Cambridge, I started racing this lady on horse, and she won after she realized I was racing her. Kind of like a weird kind of proof to myself, maybe, that I could do it. When I got to Cambridge, I was like, wow, I'm at Cambridge, should I go back? I can't go back anymore because it's a shorter distance to go to her house than it would to go back home. I just kept on riding my bike. And most of the time what I saw was flat plains and houses. So I got off my bike while I was going on the way, and because I'd been on my bike for such a long time, when I got off, I started falling around and stuff. And I thought they thought I was drunk, so I left right away. I finally saw signs that said Malacca. Went to the town grocery store where they have a free phone, and I called up Carrie. I think I got her dad. Yeah, I just said, is Carrie there? And he said, yeah, she's there. I was like, hey, Carrie. Hi. And she goes, I bet you don't know where I am. And she goes, where are you? I said, I'm at your supermarket where you used to work. She was quite surprised, and I don't know exactly how she really felt about it. And I was like, yeah, could you pick me up and feed me some food? Sure. And then she came about 15 minutes later and drove me to her house. And when I saw her, she didn't smile or anything, I thought maybe she'd be happy to see me, wow, he rode 5 hours to see me. But there was nothing like that. She lived in the basement, and they had trumpets in the basement. She's got a nice little dog that runs around and eats cigarette butts. Little frisky business every once in a while. And then she asked me how I felt about the relationship, and I feel pretty good, I just rode my bike 5 hours to get here. she's like, oh, and I know, we went about our normal business and ate some food and stuff. And then later on, I asked her why she asked me that question, and she basically told me that she didn't want to be with me anymore, physically or whatever. And I took that well, I think, considering the fact that I just rode 5 hours to get there. That might have been one of the things that made her want to break up. I was just like, maybe too much. And she seemed very upset. She started crying and stuff, you know. I felt let down, maybe, I guess, but I wasn't like extremely upset. You know, I'd rather have her tell me that she didn't like me than pretend that she liked me. I'm sure there was some sort of anger at the time. What she could have told me some other time, maybe. You know. So she was crying, and then when it was time for me to get home, you know, she decided that she didn't want to drive me all the way home because her car's a piece of shit. Her dad had just re-hauled it or re-overhauled it or overdone something. I think he basically gave it a new engine. So she drove me about a little bit less than halfway home. And I got off my bike on this 169, I think it was. I was in Elk River for a while, and I had to go up hills and down hills and up hills and down. Came to a rest stop, and there was this old guy walking around with a happy smile. Kind of, he looked at me and he winked at me, and then he went in the bathroom. Finally got into downtown Anoka, where people like to drive their cars around it. And I raced a car there, but he didn't know I was racing him at first. He beat me, but it was okay. I was skipping riding my bike, and then I finally got home around 12:30. That was about a 3-hour bike ride. But my mom was pretty surprised, and she's like, wow. Everybody I told was like, wow. Like Gary's parents are like, yeah, I heard you did some bike riding.
So that was the first of the 3 films of the bike trilogy. What do you think? All right, I think we're going to dive right into this next one. There's some questions I want to ask after this next one. I think you're going to want to have them answered too. So, yeah, enjoy.
So here's the story of the bike race.
Eddie and I, we lived together in Belgium for 5 years, and then we moved to Minneapolis for a job. And then we met you.
I, Lance, was living here with my girlfriend, and the 3 of us started hanging out in bars together. We drank a beer or 2 or 3 together.
It was great fun.
There was lots of dancing and there was lots of acting. And
For Eddie, you were his best friend as well.
And Eddie and I started to have a repetitive argument about the best bicyclist in the world.
Lance Armstrong or Eddie Merckx?
Because Lance Armstrong equaled the record of the famous Belgian from the 70s, Eddie Merckx.
In number, not in heart and bones.
So we adopted their names, and Eddie and I were out for a casual bike ride, and he started riding faster, and then I started riding faster, and then pretty soon, without knowing that we were racing, I said, okay, well, let's just have a race to decide actually who's the champion, Eddie or Lance, and we'll set up routes that are mapped in advance.
But one is not enough.
And it was decided that there would be 4 stages. Then you named it.
It's first race of the Tour de Force. How are you feeling?
The wind is strong, and I'm a little concerned about the first leg of the race being directly into the wind, but all in all, I feel confident.
Eddie?
You know, it's the first race is always touching and feeling, as they say. So we touch and feel, and I'm sure that he will see more my back than my front.
Okay, the wind in the back. Good luck.
The first race, we drove 2 cars, and this was a 25-mile stage, and I actually had been sort of training.
Eddie, on the other hand, didn't have any preparation because he, being from Belgium, that's known for good bicyclists, he thought, I'm in shape to beat the Lance guy.
I won the race rather easily.
I have not to look for excuses. I think the best one, and there's always in every race only one winner. And for today's Lance,
I felt sick, so I walked away, and then I saw a little American flag, and I knew I had to perform the national anthem in the award ceremony, so I brought the little American flag with me. At the same time that all this was occurring, there were a bunch of people getting together on Mondays, going swimming and canoeing and bicycling. And there was a Monday when I was still calling everybody, and you were the only one that could come.
Yeah, because Eddie had to work that day.
I had this idea that I wanted to walk in the river from a bridge and then go all the way to another river, which is a bigger river.
So we ended up in the river.
And we walked and walked and walked and swam parts. It was a fun day.
It was very fun.
So afterwards we went to a bar
Of course, still bored.
to have a drink, and then I think I said something to the effect that I'm kind of more interested in you than just as a friend.
And I thought, whoa, where is this going? And I was a little confused because I've never seen Lance that way.
Okay, Eddie? Eddie, the second race of the Tour de Force.
yes.
Last race you saw Lance back from the beginning till the end.
Yes, that's the way it is, you know. I'm gonna be very careful in what I say, and I hope my legs will be with me today.
We're not racing against each other, we're racing individually just against the clock,
Yeah.
a distance of 5 miles. This is what I had actually trained for, so I was surprised to lose.
And now we drove with one car, I think.
And I drove, you sat in between, and then Eddie sat in the passenger seats.
And I remember when we go into a turn, my leg touching your leg. I was already looking, oh, when will be the next turn?
This is a killer because you have to keep speed. With the hills you can a little bit calculate, but here it's going full out. And
I think you have a pretty good time. We'll see what Lance will do.
Between the first and the second stages, my girlfriend and I came over to Eddie and your apartment, and we had a dinner. And
In the little park across our apartment.
Right.
And you, Lance, we were the only two who were running around like little children.
Well, we crawled as tigers through the yard, and then we came to a garage, and in the garage we found bicycles, so we started riding
Riding
2
in
bicycles
circles.
in tight, fast circles in the garage, and then I think we started playing imaginary trombones.
Yeah.
I started to become self-conscious that I had left my girlfriend while I was running off with you, clearly having as much fun as I possibly could have.
That's the whole anthem? Right. Okay.
The next day was the next race.
Yeah, it's the mountain stage. It's represented by winning, and the Tour de France as well, the Bolkus jersey. It's a white jersey with big pink dots on it. I made the Bolkus jersey.
Good afternoon, Lance.
Hi,
The third race, what do you think?
I would like to say that I hope that both racers will race with a prudent sense of caution, because there are some steep, winding dirt hills, and I hope that Eddie keeps in mind his safety as well as his eyes on the yellow jersey and the Bulkestra.
So the 3 of us rode again in one car,
I was in the middle.
Eddie and I on either side.
You know, and I always wonder whether Eddie had suspicion. I saw him watching once in a while towards our legs. Something was going on, because I think when we drove back, Eddie was in the middle.
And I know that my opponent is more a sunshine boy, and I'm more like kind of mud and dirt Lance, and not so much a risk taker. But we'll see, you never know what's hidden in him. He's unpredictable.
When you give the trophies
Yeah.
to the winner, you gave little kisses on the cheek.
I was giving more significant kisses by then as well than the first one.
I had to sing the national anthem
It's
as the winner, and I.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine.
Between the third stage and the final stage of the Tour de Force, there was a party, and in a way that was typical for Eddie, he encouraged the two of us to dance together.
We danced and danced, and then the two of us were on the floor, on our belly, top of our fingers, almost touching each other.
And between our hands was a crack in the concrete, like a barrier. And then your pinky came creeping across the line and touched my pinky.
With energy and electricity and warmth for me.
Our hands began to get closer and closer to each other and start to touch each other.
Just the fingertips.
Just the fingertips at first, and then eventually a whole hand was in a hand. You had an enormous smile on your face,
Yeah.
and I just looked in your eyes, and then I said, this is actually happening. And then I looked out of the corner of my
Yes,
eye,
I know.
and a friend of ours was watching us, and I asked myself immediately how much of it had he seen.
When we turned, I think we looked both to each other. We were both so surprised because it was just a wall of wind that hit us.
We are feeling
Very much in love, and because we couldn't see each other like every day,
you found a tree.
which was hollow, and we could leave little notes in that tree.
The most significant thing that I received was a t-shirt.
You always forget about the little socks, which I thought were more endearing. I had to go and buy lipstick. I put it on my lips and start kissing the inside of the socks and kissing and kissing and kissing and kissing. And then I started also doing that with the t-shirt.
The final stage of the tour de force, I was wearing that t-shirt and those socks.
Glenn, last race. How do you feel?
I've had a number of strengthening salves and encouragements of a form that I think will give me the strength to finish the race in good time today.
For the final stage, there were 3 additional friends who came along.
And the race was in Ghent, Minnesota. Eddie and I, we lived in Belgium, in Ghent.
So Eddie and another friend were in one car. The 2 other friends were in the front seat of the car we were in, and we were in the back seat holding hands
Yeah.
for 2.5 hours.
It was at a certain moment I was in conflict with myself, and then suddenly got stuck, and I said like, hey, this is not as usual.
And I saw him coming around the corner and said, man, it's Eddie. He is a great guy. And I loved him as my dear friend. I thought, you know, Lance, you have the kisses on your body, but I want Eddie to win the race.
It feels good to win in Ghent, the hometown.
Of course, it's always pleasant to win at home.
Then we began the celebration in the Silver Dollar Bar in Ghent.
We had a lot of fun.
There was very high energy, and everybody that had come was shouting and screaming, and it was a very festive atmosphere. And then we went back to the motel, and through the wall I could hear voices. Hear the tone of it sounded like an argument. I thought that you had revealed to Eddie what was happening, so I went next door.
And there you were. And you just started telling the whole story to Eddie.
I just said, I'm in love with Hilda. I want to be with Hilda. I'm sorry. And then, to my surprise, Eddie just kind of put his arm around me. There was still a bottle of champagne. And he said, oh, you know, these things happen. And then the 3 of us laid down in the bed with Eddie between you and I. And we drank the bottle of champagne.
Was it a hard race?
It hurts, but that's what sports is about. It's about hurting yourself and, you know, breaking the boundaries.
And I woke up the next day and I was incredibly hungover, just felt sick and terrible. And it was clear when I went out and saw the 2 of you that things were not okay.
No, they were not okay.
Yeah.
And I felt very sick and hangover and sad and confused and very much in love. And
You and I, again, were put in the back seat to
we
ride.
ended up in the same car with the same two people in the front.
We were driving away from Ghent, Minnesota, and I was being jostled about in the back seat, feeling kind of sick, but I was holding your hand, and
I looked up at you and I said, well, I hope we like each other.
That was the John Cage national anthem.
So, Tom, or should I call you Lance? Come out here for a moment. Just a few quick questions. One, was this autobiographical?
Yes.
Two, what happened to Hilda?
Oh, Hilda's here somewhere. She's out there in the darkness. She doesn't like to be identified in these sorts of situations, but it's 15 years later and we're together, and she's here somewhere.
Number three, did you ever determine who was better, actual Lance or actual Eddie?
I think I finally conceded that Eddie Merckx probably was ultimately the better bicycle racer. Yeah.
I think we can agree on that. So, is there that was wonderful, by the way. Of the two we've seen, that was really my favorite. That was beautiful. It's really intimate that you share that with us. And I was curious what you want to say about this third animation before we show it.
Well, first of all, just to speak to the autobiographical part, these films, all the three of these films are documentary stories. That one I happen to be a part of. But the first film is something because of the elemental nature of that experience of the kid who's trying to impress the girl, who ultimately, they're very young and she doesn't understand the enormity of what it means to him, and he rides his bike 50 miles and she dumps him and he rides home. That's something that everybody's been through to some extent. So these films are meant to be, in as much as that film is a story from a former student of mine, this is a story that I personally experienced. They are meant to be sort of elemental, archetypal, sort of the difficulty of romantic relationships and some of the things we go through to end up in these situations. So the third film is the kind of resolution of the three films, and this is the life that Hilda and I, as Lance, enjoy as foolish, childish, middle-aged people who decide to bike 500 miles to Kalamazoo, Michigan, to the Bell's Brewery to ask a question about beer. And
seems important.
Well, it's a question that Hilda asked in a bar, and I thought, we probably should bike 500 miles to Kalamazoo. There is a big lake in the way, and there's some other obstacles, but I think we should probably do it. So this is just the story of that adventure, which is the final film in this series. And I also just want to say, before I let it go, that thanks to Dave, it's...
You're really working hard back there for us, buddy. We really appreciate it.
That's a dense story that's packed into 12 minutes that, in terms of Dave has been studying this, he's been restudying this material over the last couple days, and he's throwing a tremendous amount of information in responding to that stuff and doing, in terms of how the experiment's working 2/3 of the way through the process, I really like Dave's current responses to the films. I think you're doing in some ways like a better job than you did the first time.
Well, I appreciate it. I have to say, I'm really hoping I'm not getting in the way of people enjoying the dialogue. I'm enjoying the dialogue, and I'm thinking I would want me to shut up. So I hope it's okay. I'm desperately trying to not get in the way and add something. So I hope it's all right. Thank you.
Tom Schroeder and David King, ladies and gentlemen. Give them a round of applause. Let's watch this last one.
De wilde buffels eten kaas en drinken bier ook toch zo graag. So we were sitting in Cafe Barbette to drink an Oberon during the summer, and we'd wake up the next day and we would say,
Why are we feeling weird in our head from just one glass of beer? I think we should go and ask them.
them being the Bell's Brewery in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
You should bike there. Bike and we camp along the way.
And then I said, not only is it 500 miles away, but it's across a big lake.
But I thought, well, let's try it anyway. So we took off.
Wilde buffels gaan op pad en springen op een stalen rost. Day 1 began in Red Wing at 1:30 p.m. We packed all of our bags. We had tent and clothes. And then the first thing we had to do
Was crossing that bridge with like trucks.
And then-
we with that heavy loaded bikes.
unsteady with wind coming off the river. And then we were on the other side of the river, and you get the first sense that there's hills,
Yeah.
and you are in your lowest gear. You're working really hard. You kind of think you're going to come around the curve and you're going to see the top of the hill. All you see is...
Another curve higher than the one you are on.
So we probably only made it 20 to 30 miles the first day, which if you think about 500 miles, isn't a good sign.
The next problem, where to sleep, right?
Right, so we come in just at dark to Durand, Wisconsin, and you saw a woman.
Yeah, an older woman watering her plants. And she had a big yard.
We just asked her, can we set up our tent?
There you are with your bicycles and our straw hats.
We weren't threatening at all.
We weren't hell angels.
She
No,
just said,
no.
sure, just pick a spot. Day 2, enormous pancakes. On bikes at 10.
The sun was high in the sky.
This is July, and so we're starting to bike in the hottest part of the day. And the wind again, I think, too. And we started to say, God, if you change the wind, we'll make you a pancake when we get back.
Meaning God is nature. And there is no shade at all. You're just like in plain sun, staring into the distance to see the next water tower, because that meant there was a village.
And then we arrived at the town of Osseo, and we'd only gone, again, 30 miles. I was starting to think of a plan to escape. We need to find a town where you can rent a car, get on a train to go back. And then some people came up to us on the street, and we said, oh, we're not from Osseo, and they heard your accent. And you said, I'm from Belgium. We've got 2 Belgians in our group. What's your group? Cycle America. But what's Cycle America? Oh, Cycle America helps you dip your rear tire of your bicycle in the Pacific Ocean, bike all the way across the United States.
And ended up with their front wheel in the Atlantic.
Right.
Yeah.
They say if you want to come and camp with us, you can set up your tent. And if you want, you can bike with us tomorrow and eat lunch with us.
If you make it.
De wilde buffels voelen zich goed en ze hebben de kriebels in hun bloed. Day 3, waking up with Cycle America. We want lunch. Made 42 miles by noon. Cycle America was like Superman for us. They basically structured our day for us where you get up really early,
They woke up at 6.
bike the bigger part of your day and the coolest part of the day, take out the whole afternoon when it's hottest under a nice shady tree.
Yeah, siesta. And then it's hard to get back on the bike. Your behind is so sore and stiff.
Right.
But also we forgot to mention the yellow arrows.
Cycle America put the yellow arrows on the pavement. They charted off the best course
The best
possible.
and the most beautiful.
Waar heuvels worden hoge bergen, volgen ze de gele pijlen. So that would be the song that we're making up.
It actually is an oral history.
It's an oral
of
history,
what
sure.
happened.
Later in the day, we arrive in Pittsville, Wisconsin, and I think it's Bud Engelman is the first one we asked.
Yeah, the people in Wisconsin who are very inviting. And I think it's also the bicycles are sympathetic
We were beautiful.
in our ignorance.
It's true.
And we had a great evening.
We had a
At
very
the
nice
campfire, drinking the beers.
That's our first experience of the frosty mugs. What you would call water beer.
Yeah,
That-
but
that-
I started to appreciate the water beers on our trip.
Yeah. It started to seem like we were getting blessed. God has put the wind at our back, so we're definitely owing a pancake at this point. Day 4. Wake up at buds, apple flop, cherry flop, dying animal, cranberry bogs. De wilde buffels gaan recht door regen, wind en zonneschijn.
we were like singing our song, and all of a sudden that
There was a
animal.
poor little possum.
But he was on his back legs and his mouth was open.
Right.
And the blood was dripping like in slow motion.
Right, and he was dying.
You just go through the basic elements: the wind, the smell, the sun.
Clouds were coming over, and it was clear that it was going to rain. And we wanted to get to a town called Wapaka.
I felt like I was on a motorcycle. I
Exactly.
was like zooming, and I was laying in the curves, like, you know, wham, wham, wham. And
Because the storm was coming from behind us, and there was wind blowing us. And then we went in to find a motel for the night.
And
then
as soon as we checked in, it started raining.
it just poured rain for hour after hour.
That shower, I can't believe how good that shower felt.
It's true.
How you appreciate that people invented a shower.
Day 5, the moment we were leaving, the rain stopped. And we were following the storm that had overtaken us the day before.
De wilde buffels staan vroeg op om 's morgens 40 mijl.
But also by this point, because you're in the sun, you can't protect yourself. You have a little hat and you have sunscreen on you. Like
I had blisters on my butt and blisters on my hand, and my whole face was burned.
And you were wearing socks on your hands, and you bought kind of a huge diaper.
And a little bird was like picking with his beak my hairs and pulling it out of my head to make his nest.
So we come to a little town called Brillion. The woman,
But she was so nervous.
because her husband, he'd actually had his second heart attack. And she had a little blonde boy, and we just set up in the backyard, and she brought us some breakfast cereal
she was
for the
just
morning.
so sweet. She thought, well, I had my sick husband there, but now I have those two people in the yard.
Day 6. Find yellow arrows on Humpty Dumpty Road. Follow to ferry. Buy last tickets to boat.
We got very, very lucky.
It has to
I can't
be.
believe how lucky we were.
So when we come off the ferry, it was winding but not too hilly.
Yeah, and the light was so beautiful.
Right.
And
Zoom south, the sun goes down to Pentwater. Sat on stones at end of pier, looked at lake. Day 7, south again. Bought cherries and kiwis, asparagus fields, wind behind. And then we come to a Muskegon, and there's lots of glass on the street. And that's where I had a flat tire.
we didn't have any repair.
No, you're biking 500 miles.
Anything
You
at all.
don't bring a spare tube along. That's how naive we were. And then these two people came up and helped me patch the tube. And then they noticed all the luggage on our bikes. She said, why don't you guys just put up your tent in my yard?
That's how it went.
We didn't even have to ask anymore. We were invited. Day 8, breakfast with Mary. She gives us maps. It must be maps.
Maar fietsen hier en fietsen daar. Fietsen, fietsen door Wisconsin. Fietsen oost en fietsen west. Fietsen, fietsen, Kalamazoo.
And by the time we got to town, it was just at dark.
And we stopped for making a photograph with the...
Kalamazoo city limit sign. And then this guy with a long beard was attracted to us.
and especially to you.
It seemed like I was Jesus Christ to him. And then we went into the town. And then we would ask
it's just so
people
weird.
in a park.
To find an hotel.
They just all seemed like the guy that we first encountered with the beard. And I thought it was like our state of mind.
That we were just so tired.
But it turned out in Kalamazoo, they just put all of the schizophrenics into the city parks. So
That we find out the day afterwards.
day 9, all we have left to do is...
Go to the Oberon Brewery. They were going to be impressed from what we did.
Well, my sense is we would go into the Bell's Brewery and we would tell them our story. And they would bathe us in Oberon beer. They'd let us swim in the vats and drink it while we were swimming.
That's what we expect.
But it turned out that the brewery was in the process of being moved.
Yeah.
And so they said they weren't
were not
brewing any beer.
there anymore. And I said, I can smell they are brewing beer. Let's follow our nose. And we ended up across the street in another little place which was called the Kraftbrouw.
A warehouse building, and at the end of it was a bar with multiple taps, and
All photographs of the Tour de France.
on the walls were big posters in black and white of they're stopping and they're drinking beer in the middle of the Tour de France, and they're smoking cigarettes to open up their lungs for the mountain stage. In the craft brow, we met Bert, his biggest enthusiasms in life were Belgian beer and bicycling.
And bicycles.
And so we told him our story, and he treated us like kings. And
Then
so
he started asking us about the saddles that were shining because you had ridden them so much. And we were like, I don't know, we just have like a soft one.
well, Kurt was serious about bikes, but he gave us his prize bottle of barley wine.
And bird in the hand, that beer was just so good.
It turns out that the Oberon was just guiding us to the location of Craft Brow.
There's somebody who had the soul in bikes and beers.
Exactly, but that's where we really were intended to end up. We were blessed in terms of the people that we met. If it had been a little less lucky, it would be a different sort of story.
Because it would be a thriller.
Right.
Once again, David King and Tom Schroeder. Come on up here, you guys. I think, would you like to see him take a bow? I think they should take a bow. Oh, I forgot one thing. Why did the Oberon beer make you feel so funny?
We did find somebody at the brewery, and they just said it was probably a dirty tap in the bar where we were drinking.
It's important to see things through, though.
Indeed, it is. It's just to be provoked into this misadventure, as it were, was the point of the whole thing. It was a very stupid idea, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. And we met a lot of really kind people along the way, as the film indicates, but there's a lot of people we left out as well. Just people who put us up in their yards and treated us really generously. So it gives you faith in humanity.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And Dave, thanks so much for your work re-improvising the score.
I'm going up the square leg, baby, don't you wanna go? I take you to a place I've never been before.